Good morning and welcome to This Week. Damage control.
Americans are right to be angry about it, and I am angry about it.
A trio of scandals.
My question is, who's going to jail?
Tension on Capitol Hill.
Why did you mislead Congress and the American people on this?
Mr. Chairman, I did not mislead Congress nor the American people.
Is this the toughest week yet for the White House?
These are the tactics of the third world.
He made clear he thought it was an outrage, and he has taken action.
After days of disclosures and dismissals, has the president's team turned the corner? Where will Congress go next? We'll ask the top White House strategists and key lawmakers from both parties. Plus,
there isn't a weekend that hasn't gone by that someone says to me, why aren't you impeaching the president?
With the administration under fire, will the GOP go too far? We'll sort through all the political and policy fallout on our Powerhouse Roundtable.
From ABC News, This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Reporting from ABC News headquarters, George Stephanopoulos.
Hello again. The Washington scandal factory kicked into high gear this week with jobs lost, lawyers hired, witnesses grilled, and outrage all around. As investigations intensify into IRS wrongdoing, the tragedy of Benghazi, and the seizure of reporters' phone records by the Justice Department, we're going to take a close look today at where this is all headed, starting with the strategist at the Center of White House Damage Control, Dan Pfeiffer. Dan, thanks for coming back to This Week.
George, thanks for having me.
Let's talk about the IRS first and just get some factual questions on the table. You and others have said that no one in the White House knew about IRS actions before getting the heads up on the Inspector General's report last month. Are you absolutely sure of that?
Yes, that's what we've looked at. That's what we know. That's the first we've heard of it. And, you know, as it's been said, the Deputy Secretary of the Treasury was made aware just of the fact that the investigation was beginning last year, but no one in the White House was aware. And it's important to know what we actually knew, which is just that there was an investigation that was coming to conclusion, not that we knew the results. We didn't see the report until it was released last Wednesday.
That was until last Wednesday. So last June, Neil Wallen, the Deputy Treasury Secretary, is told, as far as you know, he did not tell his boss, Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner, and Geithner did not tell the White House.
That is correct.
So let's move on. What about questions about influence the other way or communications the other way from the White House to IRS or Treasury? Rob Portman, Senator Portman is coming up on the program, and he's written a letter to President Obama wanting to know what, if any, private pressure was exerted by the White House or Treasury Department political appointees on the IRS regarding the standards for approving and monitoring the tax-exempt organizations, particularly these 501c4 groups. Those are those groups that have gotten all the attention. Any communication from the White House?
No, but don't take my word for it. Take the word of the independent inspector general, who said that he found no evidence that there was any influence from anywhere outside of the IRS.
So none at all. So you have no problem turning over any communications, and you believe there are none?
No. We are going to work with Congress, as the president said, in legitimate oversight. What we're not going to participate in is partisan fishing expeditions designed to distract from the real issues at hand.
So does that mean when Senator Portman is asking for documents, emails, any communication, you're not going to comply with that request?
Well, we'll look at any requests that Congress puts forward. And we'll work with them. Our hope is that they do this in a bipartisan way to actually try to solve the problem.
But bottom line, no communication, as far as you know, from the White House to the IRS about this targeting?
No, absolutely not.
At the hearings on Friday, the outgoing acting director of the IRS, Mr. Miller, was asked about the legality of this targeting, the special scrutiny for the conservative groups. Here were the questioning.
Do you believe it is illegal for employees of the IRS to create lists to target individual groups and citizens in this country?
I think the Treasury Inspector General indicated that it might not be, but others will be able to tell that.
What do you believe?
I don't believe it is. I don't believe it should happen.
What does the president believe? Does the president believe that would be illegal?
I can't speak to the law. The law here, but the law is irrelevant. The activity was outrageous and inexcusable, and it was stopped. We need to be fixed so we ensure it never happens again.
You don't really mean the law is irrelevant, do you?
No, what I mean is that whether it's legal or illegal is not important to the fact that the conduct doesn't matter. The Department of Justice has said they're looking into the legality of this. The president's not going to wait for that. We have to make sure it doesn't happen again, regardless of how that turns out.
Going forward, there's also going to be real questions about what kind of impact this is going to have on the rest of the president's agenda. And the individual, the woman who is running the office overseeing the tax-exempt organization, Sarah Hall Ingram, is now overseeing the Treasury Department's oversight of the president's health care plan. That's raised a lot of questions among Republicans on Capitol Hill. They say that she, given her previous experience, is exactly the wrong person to be overseeing Obamacare. Your response?
Well, look, the new acting commissioner of the IRS is going to do a 30-day top-down review to see that anyone who did anything wrong is held accountable. And so, but to date, this individual you're referring to is not mentioned in the Inspector General's report. So let's get the facts before we try to indict this person in the court of public opinion.
So as far as you know, she did nothing wrong, so the president believes that she can continue to fulfill her responsibilities on his health care plan.
Let's see what the review says after 30 days and make our decision after that. Let's get some facts first.
And how about the broader questions raised by some Republicans on Capitol Hill that given the IRS's extensive responsibility for overseeing the health care law, that calls this experience with the tax-exempt organizations calls that oversight into question?
Well, I can't, George, I think the question here for both Republicans and Democrats is, are we going to come together and try to work to solve the problem? I understand the Republicans are still very angry that Obamacare is law, and they're still angry that we ran an election on this and lost. And what would be sad is if they try to use this as an excuse to try to repeal Obamacare or do something like that. Let's actually solve the problem.
And so again, you have no question about the IRS's ability to oversee and the responsibility to oversee Obamacare.
Well, no. The new acting commissioner he starts next week. He's going to get in there. He's going to do a top-to-bottom review and make sure that they can do the job and do it right.
Let's move on to Benghazi. The White House released over 100 emails this week detailing the communications with State Department and other government agencies over what was happening in those days and weeks after the attack on Benghazi. And I want to go back to something that Jay Carney said at the beginning of all this back in November about the kinds of changes the White House and the State Department were responsible for in those now infamous talking points.
The White House and the State Department have made clear that the single adjustment that was made to those talking points by either of these two institutions were changing the word consulate to diplomatic facility because consulate was inaccurate.
And do you continue to stand by that? Because the emails you released show a host of communication indicating that the changes were far more extensive.
No, what the email showed three things. I think this is very important because they undermine all of the allegations Republicans have been making for months about this. First, the email showed that all of the drafts of the talking points include, written by the CIA, include reference to the influence of a protest here. Second, references to al-Qaeda and terrorism were not taken out by the White House, as Republicans have asserted, but taken out by the CIA. And third, it shows that everyone here was trying to get it right the best we could, and that the primary driving objective for the White House, the CIA, and the State Department was to ensure we did nothing that interfered with the investigation of the people who did this.
But it also does show that the changes were more extensive than changing the word mission to consulate to diplomatic facility.
But what they absolutely show beyond a shadow of a doubt is that the Republican allegation that the White House, the State Department, someone else changed the CIA's assessment for political reasons, that has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt to be false. And so hopefully we can put this all behind us. And frankly, I think that many of the Republicans who have been talking about this, now they've seen the emails, owe Ambassador Rice an apology for the things they said about her in the wake of the attack.
Apology for what?
For accusing her of misleading the country, for saying that she didn't that somehow she was involved in some sort of political whitewash of what happened there. What she said was what the intelligence community believed at the time. And when we got further information, we told the American people what that was. That's how people know what happened here.
Finally, as you look forward in trying to get the rest of the president's agenda through the Congress in the remaining 3.5 years he has in office, you've seen the harsh words from Republican leaders talking about the arrogance of the White House, the culture of intimidation, according to Senator Marco Rubio. And Dan Balz in the Washington Post, respected political writer, points out that this is leading to a growing trust in government deficit. I want to show it. It's an article he's got in the paper today, and he writes that whatever else happens as a result of the multiple controversies that engulf the administration, one thing is clear. President Obama has failed to meet one of the most important goals he set out when he was first elected, which is to demonstrate that activist government could also be smart government. Have all the revelations this week, it sure appears that they've driven trust in government even further down. How does the president turn that around?
Well, there is no question that what happened in the IRS was a breach in trust, and we have to do everything we can to repair that breach. And that's what the president is doing. That's why he took decisive action and why we're going to make sure this never happens again. Going forward, I think it's important to know two things. One, we have taken, since the president's been in office, he has taken serious steps to reform government, make it more efficient, make it more transparent. And what I think the test here is when problems arise, how do we address it? And in the IRS, we're taking decisive action to make sure it never happens again, and we're going to hold those responsible accountable.
Dan Pfeiffer, thanks very much.